You know I've traveled near and far, see the shining sea. I've seen a lot of places and people that were nice to me. One place that's in my heart, and this is how I feel. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. She's nestled in the sandhills on a river called Kady-Ann. Special to so many who proudly served our country here. She was named for Lafayette and known for cotton mills. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. My hometown, Fayetteville. I'm so proud to be from here. It don't take long when you're away from home to find out how you feel. It's always good to come home to Fayetteville. Babe Ruth hit his first one, heard around the world. Sherman marched with the Union and burned the arsenal. Old Market House still standing, but stands for freedom's will. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. My hometown, Fayetteville. I'm so proud to be from here. It don't take long when you're away from home to find out how you feel. It's always good to come home to Fayetteville. My all-American city, Fayetteville. Talking about my hometown, Fayetteville.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the April 13th, 2015 regular Fayetteville City Council meeting. We'll do an invocation, and then I'll ask for everyone to remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. At this point, I'd like to ask my good friend, Pastor Reginald Johnson of my father's house, Christian Church, to come forward, please, and lead us with the invocation.
Amen. Amen. Giving honor to the Mayor, all the City Council, all the officials, friends, let us pray. Father God, I come to you in prayer in the name of Jesus, thanking you for this day that you've made. Thanking you for this night, this meeting, Lord. Thank you for this city that you have blessed us with, Lord. Father, praying that you will watch over this meeting. Intervene, Lord, in the behalf of the people, in the hearts and minds, Lord. I pray that you will bring clarity to every issue. I pray, Lord, that you will bring truth out to every issue in this meeting. Thank you, Lord, for those who work in this city, Lord. Thank you for their dedication, their patience, Lord. Thank you for the citizens, Lord, being able to bring their cases to this city council. We thank you for watching over it. We thank you for being in our city. We thank you for blessing us, Lord, even this night and in this season. In Jesus' name, amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we'll move into item 4.0, which is the announcements and recognitions. Ask Mr. Our own Buck Wilson to come forward, who is the director of some small county organization. I'm not real sure which. Welcome, Buck.
The proclamation reads, whereas the Partnership for Children of Cumberland County, their partners, families, businesses, early child educators, employers, government, and other local organizations, in conjunction with the National Association for the Education of Young Children, are celebrating the Week of the Young Child. It's through April 12th through the 18th. And whereas these organizations are working to improve early learning opportunities, including early literacy programs that can provide a lifetime foundation of learning for children in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And whereas the early experience of the child determines their brain structure, thus shaping the way children learn, think, and behave throughout their life. And whereas we recognize the tremendous impact that accessibility, affordability, high-quality early education for children can really help our local employers and employees, our state, and our national economic security, which provides the opportunity for the American dream. And whereas early childhood teachers and others who make a difference in the lives of our young children here in the city of Fayetteville deserves thanks and recognition. Whereas the city of Fayetteville, public policies supporting early learning for all young children are crucial to our young children's future. Now, therefore, our mayor, Nat Robertson, and the city council, and 208,000 residents here in the city of Fayetteville, hereby honorably proclaim April 12th through the 18th, Week of the Young Child. Congratulations in our Fayetteville City of History, Heroes, and a Hometown Feeling.
Hey, Buck, after your photo shoot, if you'd come to the podium, and I was making a joke earlier. Buck Wilson, of course, is the director of our health department here. You probably read his name in the newspaper every day.
Hope not.
Does some great things. Serves on many civic organizations and nonprofits such as Cumberland Health Net. I know you just came off that board, but very active in the community. Tell us a little something about this.
So I'm here today in my capacity as the board chair for the Partnership for Children. I know Karen McLeod is a past board chair, and we certainly appreciate her service, and Kady-Ann serves on the committee there. But I do want to thank the mayor and the city council for recognizing one of the community's most precious resources, and that's our children. And just one other quick thanks to echo what was in the proclamation, the early education teachers and professionals that lay the foundation for these children. We just want to have a special thanks out to them too. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Buck.
All right. As our mayor comes down, we'll be presenting the Jack Britt High School wrestling team with some awards for winning the State 4A Wrestling Championship. So please come up to the podium.
Are you coach?
Yes, sir. John DeWeese.
Nat Robertson. Pleasure. Let me present you your certificate first.
All right.
And congratulating you for winning the 4A championship in wrestling.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
And if you would take just a moment and we'll recognize the young men here.
All right.
Mike Woods.
Congratulations.
Mike.
Mayor, can you tell?
The third.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if you want to start making your way around, I think everybody'd like to congratulate
Mr. Mayor, can they tell us what weight class they wrestle at too? Give us a little bit about
You act like
themselves.
you know something about this.
This is our 106-pounder, and he can still make 106. Mikey is our 220-pounder. Bradley Wanovich.
Love to both sides, Brian. Congratulations.
Now, I got to tell you about Brad. He won his match with 8 seconds left and threw the boy to his back and and won it with just 8 seconds, so he's a state champion this year.
Awesome.
Michael Vernigallo couldn't make it tonight, sir. Richard Tolston III, we call him Peanut.
Congratulations.
And Peanut, this is Cumberland County's only and first 3-time state champion. He won it his sophomore year, his junior year, and his senior year.
That's great.
Congratulations.
That's awesome.
Nikki White.
Hey, Nikki.
Congratulations.
Absolutely.
132. They change them every 5 years, so I have to learn them all over again. Wesley Hollingsworth.
Congratulations. Thank you. Absolutely.
138. 138 pounder. Brandon Stern.
Get it, Brandon.
Brandon, congratulations.
Absolutely.
Tall but 145 pounds. Brandon is a 2-time state runner-up, and hopefully he'll be going to Gardner-Webb this year,
Awesome.
wrestling for college. Luke couldn't make it tonight. Jovan couldn't make it tonight. I had a few of them that are preparing. Paul Garcia.
Another bow tie.
Hey, Paul, congratulations.
Is it 195?
Funny.
170. He cut down a lot of weight. He's a 170 pounder. Joseph Stevenson. 182 this year, right, Joe?
Congratulations.
Absolutely.
One thing about Joe is that when we won the state dual team championship, Joe was voted the most outstanding wrestler for that tournament, and that's really a privilege to get that kind of award.
And that's awesome.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
LJ couldn't be here tonight. I don't know, it's pretty tough.
Come on down, Mr. Chris. I want to see it.
This is Byron Bryant. We call him Biscuit, and Biscuit is our heavyweight.
Man, that's a big hand, too. You play ball also?
Yes, sir.
What do you play?
Defensive tackle and fullback.
We depend on our football players to be there. Sammy Harris. Come on, Sammy.
Hey, Sam, congratulations.
Sammy had wrestled 120. He'd wrestle 126. If he wanted to, I could bump him to 132. He's one of those guys that you can put him just about anywhere, and he does a great job. Our manager is Malik Powers.
Malik, congratulations. Thank you. Absolutely.
And he's responsible for all of our gear and making sure we get it back. My assistant coach is Tim Bright. This is Tim's third year with us.
Hey, Coach.
Congratulations,
Thanks,
man.
man.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I couldn't do it without our assistant coaches, guys. They take the punishment. I'm getting too old to get on the mat, and he couldn't be here tonight.
That's great.
That's all of them, I think.
Hey, guys, if y'all wouldn't mind, come back up. Kind of get in the semicircle up here, and we'll get a couple of pictures.
Y'all gotta get tighter than that. I know Coach is from Chicago, but
Yeah, I said. Can you get up, buddy?
all right, say Buccaneers or something.
Just, the guys are absolutely wonderful. So congratulations.
It takes a lot of support. I like Reggie and Ms. Garrison. Y'all come with them.
Here, let me have that, sir. I'll take it.
Do this without support from our administrative, faculty, and everybody.
All right, look over here. Coach, I'm cutting you out. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Good job, guys. Okay, Bridge. That's what I'm talking about right there. Wow. There's our future right there.
4A state champions. That doesn't happen all the time. Congratulations again, Jack Britt wrestling team. That's awesome. Absolutely awesome. Represent well. Council, this time, I've got one more. I'm sorry. Our friends from Run for the Wall have a short presentation to make. Council, I think we have folders in front of us. Mr. Richard McDowell. Welcome.
Good evening, y'all. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, City Manager, City Attorney, and City Clerk. Thank you all for the opportunity here today, and thank you, Fayetteville, that's out there. My name is Rick McDowell, and I go by Hawk. That's my road name. I am the North Carolina State Coordinator for Run for the Wall. It's a POWMIA awareness event. And what I'd like to do is just give a little bit of history on this. The event started back in 1989. It's 27 years in running, and it was started by 2 Vietnam veterans who basically rode their motorcycles across the heartland of America and talked to the local media. They talked to the people of different states, TV and newspaper, about the facts that we still have in America not brought home thousands of fathers, brothers, sisters, uncles from foreign lands. The need for this awareness continues, so we actually honor them in the month of May. We don't give political speeches, and we don't stage demonstrations. This is a memorial run for those who cannot ride. We ride for them. We emphasize the message by traveling through this great republic in a safe manner and an orderly manner. And everyone is welcome. I actually ride my bike to Wilmington. I fill up a mason jar full of water and sand, and I take it and I dump it in the Pacific Ocean. It takes me 3.5 days to get to LA. It's a great ride across this nation for those who cannot ride. The ages that participate are from 8 to 80. We have 80-year-olds on Sportsters riding across America, believe it or not, in 30 to 50 mile an hour crosswinds. It's unbelievable to see. The majority of the riders are veterans. They're active duty, military, they're National Guard reservists, and they're retirees like myself. The remaining are civilian supporters that actually love America and want to see their neighbors come home. Entrepreneurs and friends and families. The bottom line every day, I get a little emotional on this. There are those that sit home every day, get a cup of coffee, look out the window, and wonder where their loved one is. Why? That father, that brother, that sister, that uncle, that grandfather, that great-grandfather, that neighbor. Why we, America, left them behind. It's unsaid. So we memorialize them, and we make America aware of this. It's an incredible run. We ride for those who cannot ride. That's our motto. So last year I coordinated with you all here in the city of Fayetteville. It was beautiful. They set up an incredible, I got to pound my chest for all of the POWs that didn't come back. Thank you, City Manager, for your cooperation. Mayor, thank you very much. And if you don't know, the mayor actually drove from Fayetteville with Rolling Thunder to Siler City and brought Run for the Wall into Fayetteville on his motorcycle. He led the way into the All-American City. Thank you, Mayor. We had about 490 motorcycles, but because of the weather, they ended up having to go home because of the fires and the droughts that were out west. We brought about 350 motorcycles into Fayetteville. My goal was to bring $50,000 in revenue to Fayetteville. I kind of exceeded that a little bit, and I'm pretty proud of that. The hotels, we spent about $45,150 in hotels here in Fayetteville. We also, gas, we filled up one time, the bikes. It was $5,100. We ate dinner and we had breakfast, and it was $10,500. The total amount of money we brought to revenue to Fayetteville was $67,750. That's not including what people went out to the mall or other places. So it was a very good event, and this year my goal is $75,000 to bring into Fayetteville. I don't care about the economics. I care about more people coming in and living the American dream, coming to the All-American City, my city that I'm proud of. And that's a huge statement. So in conclusion, I'm standing in front of you, my family out there, and the All-American leadership here. And I want to graciously thank you on behalf of all the men and women run for the wall last year in 2014. It was absolutely incredible here. It was flawless. From the Cumberland County Deputy Sheriffs bringing us in from the county to Spring Lake, and then the Fayetteville Police Department was absolutely phenomenal, bringing us into Fayetteville and taking us to Destiny Now Church and releasing us from there. I cannot thank you enough. Everyone was safe. We did not get one accident here in Fayetteville or in North Carolina, period. I truly appreciate the All-American City, but most importantly, the commitment and the generosity that you all allowed us to do. My goal is to bring more people, more revenue, and business to Fayetteville. That's my business plan. But to honor the men and women that have not come home. And that is my business plan for you all. I cannot say enough for thank you from the Run for the Wall. So with that, I'd like to invite you again to the second annual. In your pamphlet, I've done a little brochure up that's going to be over at the ASOM on the 20th of May from 2 to 4. I'd like for all of you to attend that if you can. I know you have a council meeting that evening. It starts from 2 to 4. We'd be honored to say thank you to you all. This is an enduring effort. It's going to happen every year, and it's going to get larger. So we continue to call for the accounting of our prisoners of war missing in action. Most importantly, to honor the wounded warriors. We do not forget our wounded warriors in the current battle. Most importantly, the Gold Star mothers and fathers that are out there that lost a loved one that were killed in action. That's part of our run. And to tell you the truth, here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, we are the tip of the spear for the events that are going on globally. A lot of people leave Fayetteville, Fort Bragg, to go overseas in harm's way for us. And that is an honor for Fayetteville, the All-American City. So with that, I encourage you to review the folders that I presented to you all, please, and to encourage you to come out on the 20th of May. We also have a website. It's www.rftw.org that you can find all this information. Look for the Midway tab, and that will draw you home to the All-American City. So with that, I want to conclude. Thank you very much. God bless America, this great nation, and continue to God bless good leadership like I'm standing in front of today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Hawk, thank you. First, thank you for your service. Second, thank you for doing what you do for this community. We recognize that it was you that brought that Midway route through Fayetteville, and rightfully so. We are the All-American City, and just appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Council, this time I'll move to item 5.0, which is the approval of the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Mr. Arp, Mr. Wright. Any discussion on the motion? All right, Council, seeing none, I'll ask for your vote, please. Madam Clerk, that's unanimous. Council consent agenda is item 6.0. Mr. Arp.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move that the council approve the consent agenda as presented with the exception of item 6.010. I'd like to have that item pulled for discussion.
Pulling 6.010.
The award contract for alterations to the Fayetteville City Hall third floor.
Okay. Is there a second on the motion? Second. It's Mr. Arp and Mr. Colvin. Any discussion on the motion? Council, seeing none, I'll ask for your vote, please.
Is that the pull-it? It's a pull-it.
It's
just a pull-it.
That's the approval of the agenda, pulling that item. And Madam Clerk, that is 9-1, Mayor Pro Tem Davey voting against. Mr. Arp, item 6.010.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I have some concerns twofold about this agenda item. One, actually three primary concerns. One, it just came to us over the weekend on our consent agenda without any foreprep of the council for what entailed with the item, specifically the fact that this item represents a 20% cost increase over the original estimate, and I didn't feel very well prepared with having a vote on that. Certainly didn't feel prepared with it being on the consent agenda. The second item is the fact that we continue to have contracts that are being bid and awarded to companies outside of our community, and that just dumbfounds me that we can't find somebody within our community that can do this type of work. And then, of course, the third item is the fact that we're going to spend $1.5 million, but just as recent as the 1st of April, and I kind of thought it was an April Fool's, we had a note that came out that said that we had a $2.4 million shortfall based on the new House bill, and we were talking about a 5% freeze for police, a 10% freeze for the general fund employees, and a 5% environmental services freeze. So I'm asking the question, and oh, by the way, tonight that number was $1.6 million. So I don't know what the number is, but the bottom line is we've got a projected shortfall. We don't know what the outcome's going to be, and yet we're talking about a $1.5 million expenditure that we could potentially put off or delay till we can define what our budgetary issues are. So I just thought it would be wise for us to have a discussion on this.
Okay, thank you. Opening up for discussion, Councilmember Moan.
Thank you, Councilmember Arp, and I appreciate staff, Deputy City Manager Bauer giving us a little spreadsheet, right before we started the meeting tonight. And I think we also need to be aware that, next year they're going to ask for more money for the second and first floors. They have a ballpark figure, about $1.6 million next year in the CIP. But that could turn out very much like this year, where we had $1 million and ended up being $1.521 million. So I'm just a little hesitant until we really see what happens with this General Assembly, the bill. We're only 2 months away from approving the next budget. I believe we approved it June 9th of last year is when we approved the budget. So here we're at April. We're talking 60 days away from approving the new budget, and we just might have some more clarity on this 1.5 million plus the 1.6 next. But we have to do something because third floor is gutted, so we can't let it sit like that. I'm just not sure the timing's right, and potentially, trying to get some more local bidders to at least try to bid. That's just something to think about.
Thank you, Mr. Moan. Mr. Colvin.
I just had I don't know if this is appropriate time to address Mr. Bauer, just to ask how many bids were received on this particular project, if he's able to answer that. Is this the appropriate time for that?
Yeah, Mr. Bauer.
Thank you, sir. We actually received 3 bids on this project. 1.521, the recommended bid was the lowest bid. We had another bid for 1.75 and a third bid for 1.89. The one bid from a Fayetteville contractor was the 1.89 bid from a local contracting firm of WECC Incorporated.
Thank you. And what are we doing? I share the same concerns that some of the fellow council members that we're constantly sending our money to Jacksonville, North Carolina. I think it's a wonderful place, but folks in my community voted for us to improve the economy in Fayetteville. And so as we're spending nearly $2 million, what are we doing to make sure that we get some level or some recognizable level of participation from our local contractors? If it's one thing I know we have plenty of in Fayetteville, now some trades that I can grant the argument that we may be a little thin, but I'm sure that we have a lot of local people that do construction and renovation work that could have hired a lot of local people and helped to promote this economy. What are we doing? What is staff's goal to raise the level of participation for projects like this, so we don't have to go through this every time we have a substantial project?
We do work with a number of local agencies to try and outreach to local communities and to get them to bid on the project. I mentioned that we did have a number of other local firms who did the walkthrough. I think we had 6 different local construction, or 6 different firms, including 2 other local firms that went through the walkthrough. Why they went through the walkthrough and then chose not to bid at this time, I do not know. Why the one who did bid was not competitive, I don't know that either. I will point out that the lowest bid does include local subcontractors in both plumbing and mechanical work. So we are paying attention to who they are. We're asking them for that information. However, we believe at this time that we do not have the legal opportunity to restrict bidding to just local contractors. Now, I understand that you have some specific concerns about different process that we may need to pursue, and that you've spoken to our city attorney about those. We certainly we'll do the research and come back to council about whether there's a different way to do this that might provide additional flexibility over the process we've been following. But I think as we talked to council actually a couple of years ago, we put in place a number of steps, including using our website and other processes to try and make sure that anyone who's local who wants to bid has the opportunity to understand about what's out there and what opportunities are available and how to work with us on doing that.
Well, I appreciate it, and this is just a follow-up to a comment that you made, but some of the other communities utilize a project manager or a developer. In our case, which is somewhat unusual, I understand that the city actually serves as that, which the city is restricted from utilizing special exceptions like local or minority or to have some type of participation limits, whereas if they allowed a separate developer or project manager like a lot of other communities, they have a lot more flexibility. Is that something that today that we can go on the record and say that staff will make a conscious effort to try to change that procedure so that we can address this problem once and for all, because it seems that it's a revolving issue that we talk about constantly.
I think it's we can go on the record to say that we will definitely research the resources that you've been talking to about that opportunity to see if it's something that can be used in this community.
Thanks, sir.
Councilmember Wright.
My question is to the city manager.
Mr. Voorhees, come on up to the podium, please.
We know the renovations, thank you, sir, for the third floor. The third floor is gutted at this time. I know we kicked out some numbers, and we looked at that 1.5. My question is the priority of the renovation and your perspectives for the vision of the renovation of the entire city hall. Can you explain that and go over those numbers just a little bit for us so we can understand?
Thank you, Council Member. I guess I could talk about the priorities. This building was first purposed for a city hall from a prior use some 25 years ago, and so it hasn't had a significant upgrade in that time. Some of the things that we've noted that are deficient in this building include ADA accessibility issues, inadequate HVAC, heating, ventilating, and cooling. We have some offices where loud fan noises are in play, where a number of the different parts of the building are served by exposed duct work that enter into the workspace. So a number of these things are goals to rectify. Probably the most important feature to me would be to ensure that council has adequate space to conduct its functions. Right now, we end up trying to cram into some conference space that just isn't big enough for council and for the public who wishes to be part of the meeting, as well as I mentioned the ADA issues, and the first floor customer service situation. It really looks like sort of a classic bureaucratic maze with high wall cubicles and that sort of thing. We're hoping to create a more inviting space where staff can collaborate with the public, with contractors and developers, and to help move their projects through instead of just sort of going stop to stop to stop through the building. So those are sort of our priority goals.
Yes, sir. Well, given the uncertainty of our budgeting and where we are at this point, that 1.5 or that extra half, where do you see that, and how would we approach the renovation at this point?
Sure. So I think that the question has been raised whether we could use those funds, the funds that are already earmarked for this project, to deal with the potential shortfall that we may see from a charter rewrite that adjusts the Public Works Commission transfer. I think the point that I would try to make there is we have to make sure that we earmark one-time funds for one-time uses and ongoing funds for ongoing uses. So while we could reappropriate or redirect those funds slated for this project to cover some sort of gap in either the current or next fiscal year, that would be one-time money. And so I would not recommend that we look to that source of funding to fund ongoing expenses. So for example, the council last year made the decision to fund a significant expansion in the police department, and in order to make sure that was an ongoing funded strategy, the tax rate was adjusted so that there would be permanent funding, if you will, to support that. So again, I think we could repurpose these funds for a one-time gap closure, but I wouldn't recommend we do it to support a permanent change in our revenue. And that I think that's just our general philosophy.
I appreciate that, Mr. City Manager, and I do, breathe the same echo of my councilman as far as local contracts, and that we will appreciate if we could look into those other avenues where we could focus on hiring local.
Thank you, council member, and we certainly share council's interest in that and try to follow all the processes we can. I would note that there are some local subcontractors that would benefit from this contract. If we aren't able to proceed with it, they would not be able to be part of the project unless they were part of a subsequent bid that was successful. So, with the good, there is also some negative. We'd be more than happy to look at different contract methods to deliver. But we do end up being hamstrung by some of the state bidding requirements. I know a number of jurisdictions have asked the state legislature for some authority to provide some sort of local preference, and that's not currently the state of affairs in North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Voorhees. Mr. McDougall.
Yes, one of our a new department, economic development. I was just, is there a way that they can help? Well, one of the goals of that department is to grow current businesses.
Yes, sir.
Is there not a way that they can be working to help some local contractors? One of the problems, and I think Councilman Chris pointed this out in our earlier session, is that it becomes frustrating for a lot of people, especially small contractors, to try to set and do all the paperwork that's required and at the same time continue their primary work. It seems as though our current economic development department could assist in that somehow. I don't know how you work out the legal parts of it, and certainly I just think that it needs to be done. I'm oftentimes given, not really given, but told by local contractors they're being overlooked. And I don't know that they really are, but if they are, then certainly we don't want to overlook them. We want to grow local business. And the other thing is, those businesses that come in, do they have like an office presence? Do they pay the necessary city user taxes? I don't know. Do they?
Well, that's a great question. It used to be that on city contracts, county contracts, school district contracts, that if a contractor from out of town came, they'd be required to obtain a city privilege license, right, and then would pay a local business professional occupational license tax to the community. But with the repeal of the privilege license enacted last year, that will no longer be the case beginning in July.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Davey.
Yes, I just had a question. I know we've talked about different opportunities, how we can be more uniformed on how we're handling contracts and businesses. So once again, I don't think it is a right precedent to just single out this project per se. If we really want to look at a new standard, we really need to look at both bodies, PwC as well. I know they're handling part of our bidding process, and I don't know if they're being scrutinized or if they're being explained to how much local contractors are a preference, as we're doing with the city. I just want to make sure that we're consistent and being uniformed. I have no problem with, as Councilmember McDougal said, talking about working this through Economic Development Department. However, we're working on a live bid right now, which is good for how long, Mr. Voorhees?
Usually 60 to 90 days. What is that? We can try to get the exact date. 60 days.
Okay.
From bid.
We're working with a live bid right now, and I don't think it's fair to penalize who's been through this process already. If it's a new precedent that we want to start and really enforce, I think it needs to be something that the city and PwC comes and sits down together, since we're both in the purchasing department, unless we're going to bring purchasing all the way to the city. We need to make sure that we're being consistent and being uniformed on both sides of the spectrums. When you're thinking about the usability of this building, I hear it day in and day out in my community that I walk in here and it's not a business friendly environment. You know, we talk about these calls we're getting from inspections and various entities. It needs to be a welcoming area, and there's other buildings such as PwC that is keeping up with the times, and they have the technology. And I think that City Hall, the city of Fayetteville, which has 90+% of the taxpayers here, should have a user-friendly building that people can come in and that's ADA accessible, and that our employees are not in a building with duck ears open everywhere and HVAC risks. So we're talking about risk management and how we can do better with that. I believe that was brought up at one of our steering committee meeting, which that idea didn't go anywhere. So risk management is important, and it's important to tackle it from both spectrums, because if you're expecting something from the city side, you also need to expect the same from PwC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Arp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We owe it to...
I'm sorry, Mr. Arp. Mr. Crisp was next.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
my apologies, Mr. Crisp.
Thank you. A question and then a comment. My understanding is the third floor, which is approximately 1/3 of this building, is presently gutted. Is that correct?
Yes, council member.
And we set out to do this because we need to make this building customer friendly, and the whole design, our whole purpose and intent is to improve our customer service. Is that correct?
Yes, council member.
Now, if this contract is not approved tonight by council, then 1/3 of this building will be vacant and unusable for how long? Until we decide?
Yes, sir.
Well, we already decided. We appropriated money in the current budget to do this. Okay, somebody said 20% cost overrun. I know a cost overrun much greater than that, but we won't go into that. But is it fair to our citizens to put this project on hold and 1/3 of this building remains demolished up there and uninhabitable? We're not able to use it when the money was appropriated. We're not talking about next budget, we're talking about this budget, and these monies are one-time appropriation to do this. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crisp. Mr. Arp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm the one that highlighted the cost overrun, and I'll own up to that one, okay? Because the cost overrun's a cost overrun. Doesn't matter what your reason is, it's a cost overrun. We owe it to the citizens to not manufacture a crisis. And I think that's what we've done. We've manufactured a budgetary crisis when we came out on April the 1st, and we stated that we were going to have to freeze hiring. We cried wolf. We were going to have to freeze hiring of police and fire, of general fund employees, and we were going to have to cut environmental services and all this. And then we come back in, and out of the other side of our mouth we say, but you know what, we need to spend $1.5 million, which includes a 20% cost overrun, to renovate the upstairs, which has been vacant for how long? 2 years?
Let me check. No, sir. We've been phasing out the departments over the course of the last year.
And
it's been completely vacant for
completely vacant for 3 months, and we've had people, we moved them to, right,
Fire Station 14.
Sure, so we haven't dislocated people, they don't have offices. Here's the bottom line. We know we got budgetary impacts coming. We know that there's going to be an impact from the legislative action on the PWC charter. We know that. What it is, we don't know. We also know there's a budgetary impact with the privilege license change that's going to take place this summer. We also know that we've got the state sales tax that we've got to go back and renegotiate with the county. The point that I would make is before we ever discuss a hiring freeze and not staffing people to the levels that we need to staff to meet the service requirements of this city, we should table this item until we answer these budgetary issues. So, Mr. Mayor, I would move that we table this item until we can answer these budgetary issues.
Mr. Harp, seconded by Mr. Colvin. I have a discussion on the motion, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, may I have my second go?
Yes. I've got a bunch of lights up here. Hang on just a minute. I want to make sure I get everybody straight. Mayor Pro Tem Davey was first. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to reinforce we're talking about two different budgets. The budget that you all are talking about right now is what was already allocated in the budget. In regards to what Councilmember Arp is saying, that's the new budget, which is coming July 1st. And we have done that many of times moving into a budget time that we just tell everyone to cut across the board just to kind of see where you're at. And then when we get to the budget workshops and we kind of dive into it a little bit more, I don't think any of us thought that the outcome of the PWC litigation, that they're going to kind of be their own authority now. So even though that 90% of their users are taxpayers. So, there's things that you come when you're dealing with government. There's different, as I would say, road stops that come, and you have to be able to deal with it. But at the bottom line, the citizens deserve a user-friendly, ADA accessible building. I mean, we're not in compliant right now. We can get in trouble from a national level. And this money, again, has already been allocated for this budget. And in regards to the comments that were made before, it is the next budget cycle.
Let me say this. I agree with the city manager's alert memo, if you will, that said to the departments, as a worst case scenario, be prepared for hiring freeze, be prepared for 10% budget cuts in your departments. I think that's wise to give the departments as much advance information as possible so that they can look at the worst case scenario in the event we have to do that. He has not instituted a 10% budget cut in the departments. We haven't approved a budget yet. So obviously he hasn't implemented a 10% budget cut in each department. And a hiring freeze will be dependent on what we're able to do in the forthcoming budget. And so we're talking about two different things here. We cannot continue to take money from the current budget to look down the road. We've got to spend what we said we were going to spend it for. And as we approach and attack our new budget, obviously we're going to have some serious problems, just as we had last time, just as we have every year when we're structuring a budget. It's never an easy thing. But I'm with the Mayor Pro Tem in saying this. We are not in compliance with ADA, and we stand to lose an awful lot if the federal government decided to step in here and take a look at this and how long we've been out of compliance. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chris. Mr. Colvin.
Well, I mean, I think that we have a couple different things going on. If the third floor is not in use, then we're not out of compliance because we don't have people that are using it. But I am for the renovation of the third floor. But if we take $500,000 to use now that we've allocated to use next year, then next year we're going to be $500,000 short, plus whatever the cost increase are between now and next year. And if we take it from the year after that, then we're going to be short the year after that. We're kicking the can down the road. What I would like to know is what is the total cost of the project, okay, Mr. Manager? The total cost of the project, not our shortage, but the total cost of the project that's been allocated. And based on the fact that we're already out of budget in this particular phase, how far out of budget do you anticipate us to be? My issue was not necessarily how far we were out of budget. My issue is the fact that we're sending this money to Jacksonville, North Carolina. That's my problem. And so I cannot support this project until there's more effort shown into how to get some of these construction workers and unemployed people working in Fayetteville. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Arp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to make it clear for the record. I have supported the renovations of this building, and I think they are needed. So I'm not opposed to the renovations. My issue is twofold, and one is, and Mayor Pro Tem Davey, respectfully, I think you're wrong in your assessment, because when I read the manager's note from the 1st of April, it says, because of the uncertainty created by the charter bill, I'm immediately implementing a hiring freeze for all departments. That's not next year, that's this year. And all offer letters will now need to be approved by me personally effective April 1st. I will be deferring some hiring to see if we can capture some savings going forward. Department directors should direct an appeal to me as to what mission critical reason necessitates the hiring. That's for this year, okay? My second issue is, because the way we've broken this project apart, we've made it difficult. I'm sure the reason we had some local vendors that came through and did the walkthrough opted not to do it, it didn't meet the monetary value of what they considered in their risk assessment in taking on that job. And so you say, well, gosh, if you make it a larger value project, that excludes some of our smaller vendors. I would say it's just the opposite. If you make it a larger bundle, then these local companies will come in and subcontract our smaller businesses who need to develop the past performance and the ratings to be able to compete for options like this. So I just would say I'm not in favor of moving forward on this for a multitude of reasons, as I've stated.
Mayor Pro Tem Davey. Then we're calling for question, please.
Okay. Councilmember Arp, I again will have to respectfully disagree with what you have to say. In regards to the email that Mr. Voorhees sent out, our city manager, of course, it's a public documentation. Making a recommendation for a hiring freeze, as Councilmember Chris said, nothing is set in stone until us, the governing body, the policymakers, actually make the vote prior to July 1st. So a recommendation is not the same as something that's actually going into effect. You can say, well, from this day forward, we want you to put on hold, but therefore, in regards to what's going to happen to that money that's on hold, there has not been a decision on what's going to happen to that money until we make our budget recommendation. In regards to the contract, I would have to disagree on making the contracts larger. I've heard from a lot of small subcontractors, especially through the Hope 6 project, that are totally against making the project larger because they don't feel like they have a good say-so or a good opportunity being subcontract, because a lot of the large contractors will bring in their own subcontractors to be part of it. So that would be my response.
All right, Council, thank you very much. I'm going to ask at this time that you, Mr. Arp, restate your motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, did I not punch my button?
No, sir.
He had his hand up, though.
Well, I didn't have my hand up. I punched my button over here. Maybe you need to check my button, make sure it's
all right, Mr. McDougal, then we're calling for questions.
Well, if it's a burden for you, I won't say anything. But I do want you to know that I think it's inappropriate to put this particular piece on hold or table at this time. We've been working on it. We've allocated. It's just time to move forward. It seems as though sometimes when we don't like something else that's done, we try to punish by somehow pulling something else. That's, to me, is a little childish, a little immature, because I don't like something else you did. and, you know, I'm going to punch you over here. It's not very adult-like, I don't think. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. McDougall.
Mr. Moan. Mr. Mayor.
All right, I tell you what, we'll just continue, council, until you guys are finished, because evidently calling for questions twice didn't do any good. So, Mr. Moan, you go ahead, sir.
Right, and I appreciate that, Mayor. And I went back to our CIP, the one we approved this year. Total project cost was like 4.385 over the life of the project. And then what was allocated through this year, not counting next year, the 1.25 of next year, there was 3.135, allocated. This comes off of Mr. Bauer's sheet. We spend the 1.521, that leaves us with just over $500,000, and that'll take care of the third floor. And now the part where the ADA and all that other stuff comes into play is the first floor, where the people come in, the friendly part. We only have $500,000 left, and they're gonna ask for $1.62 million next month when we do our budget discussions, and we're gonna have to come up with that money. In another agenda item tonight, we're taking $300,000 out of the tax increase that we've realized the first 6 months of this year, and it's been put towards environmental services because of increased maintenance costs. We voted on that during the consent agenda. So that gain, a portion of that gain from the first 6 months of the sales tax is already gone. Not all of it, probably about 25%. So we talk about the first floor. There's no money in next year's budget for the first floor. $500,000 right now, unless we stop something else to pay for that. And just a comment, just an observation.
All right, anybody else? Mr. Upper, state your motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion was that we table the award contract for alterations to the Fayetteville City Hall third floor until we have disclosed and discovered all the budgetary impacts that we're facing.
That was seconded by Councilmember Colvin. I'll ask for your vote, please.
Can I do a friendly amendment to that? To see if
Sure.
Okay.
Since you seconded, yes.
Okay. So, in addition to that, I would like to see if the project, maybe that was placed on hold, but at least rebid to see if we could acquire some additional participation while they're researching that. That is something that I would like to see if we could do that, because I think that part of my concerns, unless we do another motion vote, were related to the participation in the rebidding versus someone just. I don't know if you can clean that up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think here. So, how about if we tabled the award of the contract for the resurface or the alterations to the Fayetteville City Hall third floor for 90 days until we can clear these budgetary issues? Well, after 90 days, it'll have to be rebid because the bid will be, bids are only good for 60 to 90 days.
All right. Okay, that's the motion. Have a second. Let's vote, please. Yeah. The vote does fail. Voting against the motion, Councilmember Crisp, Councilmember Wright, Councilmember Davey, Councilmember Hurst, Councilmember McDougall. Voting in favor, Councilmember Jensen, Councilmember Arp, Mayor Robertson, Councilmember Colvin, Councilmember Moan.
So they're going to adopt the contract?
At this time, we'll move into the public forum.
They didn't vote on it.
Mayor?
Heard Mr. Crisp first, and then Mr. McDougall.
As a dissenting vote, I do have the right to recall on that same issue. If the new motion would be without discussion, would be to take it for 90 days, then I would change my vote.
Mr. Mayor, that was the motion.
He just didn't hear that part.
Yeah, Mr. Arp, Madam Attorney.
So, Councilmember Chris is asking for a revote on the previous motion.
Correct.
That's correct.
Is that okay?
He has the right as a dissenting voter.
Yeah, Councilmember Arp, restate the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion would be that we would table the awarded contract for alterations to the Fayetteville City Hall third floor for 90 days.
Okay. That had an appropriate second by Councilmember Colvin. Council, I'll ask for your vote at this time.
Did you second that?
I second.
Man, y'all need
Mr. Mayor, I need to clarify whether Councilmember Colvin is seconding that
Amended?
the current motion. Yes.
I did. That was what it was the first time.
Okay.
I amended what he wanted.
So, those in favor of the motion, Councilmember Crisp, Councilmember Jensen, Councilmember Arp, Mayor Robertson, Councilmember Colvin, Councilmember Moan. Those opposed, Councilmember Wright, Councilmember Davey, Councilmember Hurst, Councilmember McDougal. All right. Thank you, Council. At this time, we'll move into the public hearing. This is the time that any Fayetteville resident may have input and a voice into what goes on in the city. Due to policy restrictions, the forum will last no longer than 30 minutes, and each speaker will be limited to only 3 minutes to address the City Council on city-related issues. Individuals wishing to speak at tonight's public forum should have already signed up with the city clerk prior to the start of the meeting. If you're here to speak on an item that appears later on in the agenda, we ask that you only do one of those. So when your name is called by the city clerk, we ask that you come to the podium and clearly state your name and home address for the record. Then when you see the lights located on the podium turn from green to yellow, you have 30 seconds left to speak. When you see the red light come on, your time has expired. Due to policy restrictions, we will be unable to extend that time. Madam Clerk, I'd ask you at this time to call your first speaker, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 8 speakers have signed up for this evening. The first speaker is Miss Angie Wells.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. I am Angie Wells, 42, Lyndhurst Drive, 28314. I'm with the Communication Workers of America, a labor union that represents over 7,000 active members and 4,000 retirees in the state of North Carolina. Here in Fayetteville, CWA represents over 500 members, mostly in call center jobs. I come to you this evening to discuss the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, the worst trade agreement that most people have never heard of. It is referred to as NAFTA on steroids, but simply put, it will be the death blow to the remaining manufacturing and call center jobs in this country. You may ask, why are we speaking to local municipalities about this multinational trade agreement? Well, frankly, the consequences of the TPP will directly impact the citizens and the city of Fayetteville. If the TPP passes, the 500 call center employees in Fayetteville and their families will be competing with workers in Vietnam with the average hourly wage of 58 cents. If the TPP passes, Buy American programs passed by the Buy American Act of 1933 will no longer exist. TPP will nullify the requirement by the federal government to give preference of federal procurement to goods produced in the United States. This Buy American preference ensures that billions of U.S. government expenditures are recycled into our economy to create jobs here in the United States. If TPP passes, multinational corporations would have new powers as sovereign governments to sue in international tribunals and expose the U.S. taxpayer, states, and municipalities to billions in new liability under the Investor State Dispute Settlement, or ISDS. To add insult to injury, a bill will be introduced tomorrow in the U.S. Senate to fast-track TPP. Fast track is a procedure created in the 1970s by the Nixon administration that gives executive authority to quickly get bills through Congress without the ability to have it discussed, amended, or modified by Congress. We respectfully ask this body for a resolution against fast track for the TPP. So at the very least, this secretly negotiated agreement can be brought to the full Congress in the light of day, discussed, amended, and modified for the workers of this country and the 500 call center workers and their families in the city of Fayetteville. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wells.
Mayor, our next speaker is Mr. Ben Stout. Mr. Ben Stout.
Welcome, Mr. Stout.
Ben Stout, 317 McAllister Street, Fayetteville, 28305. Wanted to thank you so much for allowing me to come to speak. I currently serve on the Home Builders Association Board of Directors, as well as I'm a co-chairman on the Zoning Commission, and I appreciate y'all's support and nominating me for that position. And what I'd like to talk about is a situation I'm sure you're familiar with, and it's been brought up this evening with maybe some of the hiring situations, but within the building industry, both in the commercial and residential avenues, the ongoing delays with the electrical inspections in that department are really having consequences. And one of the situations and one of the reasons I was here is to kind of give a little insight into one of the projects that I worked on and just kind of give a real life story to it. Recently did a upfit on the Cricket Wireless. There's a client there who's done a number of them in Wilmington, Raleigh, and came to Fayetteville. These are known as a quick setup. Most of the time they only take 2 to 3 weeks to from the time we start to the time we finish to the time that she's actually able to sell products, which is great for Fayetteville. It brings employees. It also creates revenue in the sales of these products. And as the project wraps up, one of the situations I think is often overlooked is the newspaper had an article where it's mentioned there's a 10-day plus or minus delay for these inspections, but that's not the whole story. In the building industry, we have a rough-in process as well as a final process. And what you're experiencing is on the rough-in process, you have a 2-week, and that's a Monday through Friday 2-week. And then on the backside, when you get your final inspections, before you can actually open up the facility, you still have inspections that take place after the electrical inspection, which can't occur until you have that. So really, you're talking about a 2-week delay up front and a 2-week delay on the backside before either businesses or residences can be ready to be opened or used by the end consumer. And in the situation of the Cricket Wireless, we called in for our final. We're told it would take 2 weeks, which is almost half the length of the project. And thankfully, with some maneuvering, we were able to expedite that process and get her open to meet her grand opening deadline. When you have a deadline set, it's sometimes hard to explain to a customer why it takes so long. So behind the politics of the hiring and this, that, and the other, I'm not sure all that, but I just want to continue the council to continue to be aware of this situation. I've seen paperwork. We know that there's stuff that's taking place. I know Mr. Maples and Mr. Schufert are doing their best, but it really would be great if we could continue to have the awareness brought before y'all so you understand that what's taking place is really impacting the ability to get these projects moving along, finalized every step of the way. It really is more of a month's delay versus days or weeks. So appreciate your time and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Stout.
Mayor, our next speaker is Mr. David Gibson. Mr. David Gibson.
Welcome, Mr. Gibson.
My name is David Gibson. I live 517 Queensboro Street. And what I'm here for is going to be short. On the February the 21st, they voted to condemn the projects on our, the laws of part of the Murchison Road. But what I'm trying to say is that they didn't inform no one about this, that's going to happen. The only way I found out that this was condemned was going to take place during the television. I watched television that night. Then what happened is they voted 10-0 to condemn the property. Now, I want to know what that condemn is because my house is pretty well structured or whatnot, so condemning, what's the meaning to that?
All right, we'll be happy to get someone with staff to get with you and kind of go over the entire process. Have you spoken with anybody on staff, Mr. Gibson?
Well, I have, but I mean, it's okay.
Are you currently living in that house?
Yeah, I'm currently living in it, right.
Okay, let's ask Ms. Small-Tony to step outside and see if you can answer, see if she can answer your questions.
My daughter would like to speak for a minute.
Okay.
Come on.
I tell you what, Madam Clerk, if we can move Miss Gibson down to the bottom of the list while they meet with Miss Small-Tony, and then if she'd still like to speak at the end, we can hear from her at that point. Okay, go ahead.
Mayor, our next speaker is Miss Susan Bullock.
Good evening, Ms. Bullock.
Good evening. Susan Bullock, 5612 Toggle Avenue. I would like to, and I don't know where the city of Fayetteville is sitting with the trailer issue, the trailers in the front yard and so forth, but I have an issue of our neighbor, and I called code ordinance to see, if we could get someone out there and get the area cleaned up in the front yard and so forth, and she stated to me that there was nothing that could be done due to, I guess there's some type of dispute going on between code ordinance and city council right now. So that's really what I'm here to address, where we're at with this situation.
Have you spoken, Ms. Bullock, have you spoken with any staff members?
Other than calling ordinance last week and having someone come out to the residence, which we have, this situation in the first picture, that has been going on for 10 months. That's actually a blue tarp with God knows what's under it. And we've asked them several times to please, so they have a backyard they can move this into. But it's not being used. I understand the whole problem of people using these trailers for work, that they drive to and from home. They sit there. I don't have an issue with that. If they're not being used, I do have an issue with that. And what's really got me so upset here lately is if you look in the pictures, the other two trailers have been put, two more have been brought up in the last 2 weeks. So it's really, they're not being used. They're just not being used. Either there needs to be some type of ordinance. I don't know what's going on with the city and what we're supposed to be going by at this moment, but I think there should be a fine line between if they're actually being used or just sitting there looking like junk.
We'll pass that on. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Our next speaker is Mr. Keith Bullock. Oh, okay. All right. Our next speaker is Mr. Christopher Tober.
My name is Christopher Tober, and I live in my car with my mom. We're homeless, and we stay by the church over here, by the library, in Hay Street Church. And while my mom was running for county commissioner, I had a privilege to talk to Mr. Nat Robertson about some ways to raise money, like charity, or have a fundraiser event for raise money for a community center, not only a day center like the paper said, but like a night center, because at night during the wintertime it gets cold in the wintertime, and during the day in the summertime it gets hot. And my idea was to have a charity flag football game between the homeless and the city police, and I went back to, I had people like ESPN and an ex-football player who played for the Cincinnati Bengals tell me if I can get this going, they'll help me out and help me get things going, rolling the ball. And I was like, okay. And I went to the police station. I wrote them a letter in April, and I went back in July. I had somebody tell me when I went up there that there was going to be a liability and all. And I was saying to myself, that's what a lawyer's for, to write up a contract so people if someone gets injured, you can't sue. And also my other ideas were like having a marathon or or like a run or walkathon to raise money for this center, or maybe like a community bazaar or something to raise money for the center, like a parish bazaar or a community bazaar or church bazaars. There are a lot of churches in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tober.
Mayor, our next speaker is Miss Chris Vino.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Chris Vino, 3286 Yarmouth Drive, Fayetteville, North Carolina, 28306. I come to you this evening on behalf of the Dorothy Gilmore Center. I'm sure you know the last few weeks it's gotten quite some publicity of losing our director after 10.5 years. We have a new director who's amazing, by the way, and we need help. And we have 2 positions that have gone they haven't been refilled for almost a year. One left in July, one left in August. And we have our special needs community is just growing in leaps and bounds. And right now, Special Olympics, you have to be 8 to participate. There is a young athletes program for 3 to 7, but because there's no staff, we don't have that opportunity. And it's heartbreaking. And one of the things is, the Gilmore Center, it is such a safe haven for our community. And not to be able to access that to the fullest is so disheartening. We have such an opportunity here to staff those 2 positions that have gone for almost a year without being staffed. And I come to you because we've heard for almost a year they're coming. So that's why I'm here tonight, to please ensure that they are coming and that this center will be treated as the other centers have been treated. We absolutely, no matter what you're facing, let alone a special needs community, you need more than one person at a facility. And if we could bring in that 3 to 7-year-old also, can you imagine how many families we could save, maybe how many marriages we could save? You've got already in place families that have been there, have done this for 5 to 25 years. Sometimes it takes a husband 3 more years than it takes the wife to digest a diagnosis. And if you have an opportunity to bring the young in with those that have been experiencing things, so we're going to Duke, we're isolated, we're constantly going and doing things. But yet I've learned so much from other parents that have given me the tools to be successful and to keep those costs down. There is such an untapped resource that you all have, and parents that have been there and done that, I would just begging you, you can't beat free. You just can't beat that. You can't beat that experience. You can't, the other thing that plagues me is we are compassionate assignment for Fort Bragg. But if you're not already in the EFMP system, that takes months. It takes months to establish. And we need somewhere for our families to go to and to further understand that we do so much better together. And I greatly appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Vino.
Mayor, our final speaker is Miss Patricia Gibson.
Okay, she stepped out, and I think she is still speaking with staff.
Okay, we have no further speakers.
Okay, very good. We'll close the public forum and move to item 8.0, 8.01, which is the update to PwC's audit deficiencies as it relates to the 2014-15 budget. Is that correct? The audit on 14-15? Welcome, Mr. Dwight Miller with PwC.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'd like to update you tonight on the progress that we have made in the deficiencies, the audit deficiencies that were noted in the fiscal 2014 audit. Those two deficiencies dealt with the system access and segregation of duties, and the other is the timely closing and properly accounting for work orders and capital projects in Oracle work and asset management system. The acronym that you'll hear quite often is WHAM when we're referring to this particular module. We did bring in Cherry Beckert's Risk Advisory Services and Baker Tilly to assist in mitigating the identified deficiencies. Looking at the status report for the segregation of duties and Oracle access, the open items as of February the 25th of 2015, you can see are listed there. This February, the reason I'm comparing this is February the 25th was the date that a report was given to the PwC, and this report was forwarded over to the city staff. You can see that we had some open items still, but as of today, these 6 open items have been completed. To actually complete this deficiency related to the segregation of duties, we'll need to formalize and place into service the periodic access review control process. We had originally expected the remediation of this particular deficiency at the end of March 2015. We believe with the, given the current status, be more reasonable to expect the PAR control to be in place by May of 2015. This diagram shows you this PAR control flow. It's a very high level, but essentially to a report is run by our IT department. That report is given to management. Management reviews for any issues that may be in place, such as an employee may move from one function to another, and this report, we would be looking at this on a quarterly basis to make any corrections in any access controls to the system. They may not need the controls or access that they have previously had. Once we identify those, we would move that into back to IT to make those corrections, and then the following quarter we would run the same review again. So this was an ongoing process. Once we get this in place, we do plan on running this twice in the month of May to make sure that we have all of our everything is basically alleviated. The concerns are alleviated at that point. We will run this again the end of June for our auditors to review to make sure that they are satisfied with these controls. We'll probably have them to come in and do a preliminary to make sure that we don't get to the end of June and there be an issue, but we do not feel that there will be because of their risk advisory services folks are working with us on this. The second deficiency deals with the work order and asset management system. The work order cost recording and closing process and how this process interfaces with the Oracle WHAM and EBS modules. The EBS module is the financial module, and where the WHAM is the work order asset management. That all of our work basically that goes through, that is produced, produces a work order, and that is recording of the cost with this particular work order and how it then is processed in WHAM and then moves to EBS to be booked to our financial system. Some of the milestones that we are looking at here, we're looking, and you'll hear me say UAT, that is our test environment, and PROD is our production environment. In test, we're looking at reducing or have reduced these maintenance work orders by 75%. That is complete, and we've met our goals in doing this. We are currently working in production to reduce these maintenance work orders by 100%. We have about 7,100 maintenance work orders that we are dealing with, and we are on track to have those closed by the end of this month. The next milestone is decreasing the backlog of work orders, capital work orders in UAT by 50% by the middle of May. Then the next objective is decreasing 100% of these back orders or this backlog of capital work orders by 100% in production by June the 15th. The document, we're documenting the work. We've started that as we're learning and going through this process. We look to have this completed by the documentation by the 30th of June, and document the issues and remediation to enhance the system and our processes by the end of July. And I'll take any questions if you have some.
We do. Councilmember Colvin.
Mr. Miller, thank you for that. I mean, that was a very high-level presentation that, we were following. Just for the folks at home that may not do this on a daily basis, can you state for me what the two main issues? It was two main issues that the auditor said that you had issues with over there at PwC. What were they, and could you make those layman terms? And I've got a follow-up question to that.
Okay. These are the two items here that is bulleted under the two significant control deficiencies. The system access and controls, this is who and a need to have access to certain areas. It's like the general employees would not have access to the payroll records or the payroll processing. So you want to make sure that that the proper people have those access, and that there is a proper segregation of duties. So you don't have one person that's putting the pay for a particular employee into the system, and they're also the ones that is producing the paychecks.
Right.
This would be the same thing with purchasing. You don't want the same person that is issuing purchase orders to be the one that's doing accounts payable and have those.
What the audit found was that there was some of that going on, but these are your corrective measures to cure that.
And that is a normal process in a large conversion, as we had undergone by the end of we were about 6 months into the new system when we had our audit. So we did not have all of these controls in place at this point. So it's a normal process that you go through to make sure, and as your processes change, as they did with the new system, then you've got to go through and make sure that the proper controls are in place.
But you anticipate, if I'm understanding you correctly, back on the 25th, you said that you would have those deficiencies corrected by June. You still think you can meet that timeline?
Well, with this particular deficiency, we feel like that we have it corrected already because of those items that I identified. And then we will actually run the report and run it through the control process and do the evaluation to make sure that what we have put in place is actually what is occurring.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to Councilmember Crisp.
Mr. Miller, show me the last slide you had that one. Now that's showing work orders that have not been completed or closed out yet. Is that what that is?
Well, actually, the work has been done, but they have not made it through the WAM system and into our general ledger system.
Okay. So I'm looking at a number of them there that are, well, the last one, the next to last, 25%. Does that mean 75% still need to be processed?
This is the next to the last line that has the 25% complete. That is the documentation.
Okay. So you still have something of a backlog on things, work orders that have been completed, but not actually recorded properly and closed out. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, and what's occurring here, all of this, you've got maintenance and you've got capital items that are in the construction work in progress account. They've not been cleared out of that construction work in process account, so therefore you have expense items that is in with capital items and have not been properly recorded. We have everything captured, we just don't have it in the proper bucket.
Now, you said earlier, I saw, and I'm going to ask, I think you were saying a more realistic target date to clean all this up is May. Is that what you said?
The first, the SOD and access control, we'll have, we feel like we have everything in place at this point, but actually having the PAR run will be in May. Okay. This particular item, this will be the third item from the end, and that is decrease the backlog of capital work orders by 100% in production by the middle of June.
Okay.
So this particular deficiency would be remedied by the significant part of it would be in the end of June or the middle of June.
Understanding there. Thank you so much. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Davey.
Thank you, Dwight. Just a couple of questions. I was trying to look this up on my agenda. Do we have copies of these slides or?
We can make those available. I mean, you have them here, so I can email those to you tomorrow.
Okay, that'd be good because I know this is good information. It would be good to have it in the packet. So, like with the work orders, just help me understand that again. How many work orders have been through this process, or?
We have almost 7,100 that is in this process that we are working to clear and move through, which those are 7,100 of them are maintenance that we have identified as maintenance work orders. Then we have about 3,000 capital work orders that is in this group. So we've broken them into two different units, and we're trying to get the maintenance work orders, which are an expense, out of the way and cleared through. The capital work orders, because of the way that they are staked, the as-built, as they go out and put an electric line, up down the road, how is it actually built? That is called staking, and those present some additional issues that require a little bit longer to work on and not as easily to clear through as the maintenance work orders are.
So you're saying, the whole pot is 7,100 work orders and about 3,000 are capital and the remaining are maintenance, is what you're saying?
There's over 10,000 total.
Okay. So
7,000
is it maintenance?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
Yes, my question was, we understand that you have a backlog here and that you have a time frame of bringing that to 100%. Is that right, all of those backlogs?
Yes, to clear the deficiency so it is not continued into next year's audit as a deficiency.
Okay. What are you doing if it's not asking too much, you don't have to get too in depth with what are your staff doing to bring all of these backlogs up to date? I know you have maintenance and things of that nature, and you explained a little bit of that with Councilmember Davey, but what have you put in place to ensure that you meet those deadlines on those backlogs? You know what I mean?
We have
That you're not doing now.
We've dedicated 6 people that is all they are working on right now with the consultants to move these work orders through, to make sure and that they are actually recording properly. And that is the whole issue, was these recording properly, the reason they had not been moving on through. Once we get this set up, they will automatically close anything that does not have an exception after 60 days. Once the work is done, then we will hold that work order open for 60 days to make sure that there's not any other charges from inventory, payroll, any of those type things that may come through. And then it will automatically close.
Okay. So based on that system, where you have achieved some backlog being closed down, you're basing your deadline on that procedure. Is that what you're doing?
Yes, as to what we feel like we will be able to clear these out by the in production, and that's what we're doing. We run them through the test environment first, and to see if there's any issues that come up. The actual production, the live computer system, basically, that the actual as to what we use, and the official, I guess, is the best way to put that.
Okay.
The official record then is, once we run them through the test environment, then we'll run them through and get everything cleared up. We'll run it through the production environment, and that is the last piece, the last phase of that is when we do run them through the production.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, will you report back to us upon final completion of everything, or what's the next step for report for us?
I have a report scheduled for our commission next Wednesday, not this, at our next commission meeting. I believe the council wanted to be updated every 60 days. Was that, so that would bring us down to the May time period? It'd be June time period.
Very good, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, council, this time I'll entertain your favorite motion. Oh, Madam Attorney, did you have something?
Yes, Mayor, if you'll recall, Ms. Gibson stepped outside to speak to staff, and council had deferred her speaking while she spoke to staff. I believe she is back and still has an interest in speaking to council.
Great. We will hear that. Please come forward, Ms. Gibson.
Yes, good evening. I'm here in behalf of my father, David Gibson. He received a notice of condemnation from the city inquiring about purchasing his property through eminent domain for revitalization and economic development. Now, the purpose of me being here today is I'm not clear as to the purpose of trying to purchase his home, and he has to now remove himself from this property, and now he has to seek another location. Now, he's an elderly gentleman who's been in this home for a number of years, and you're basically asking him to now relocate, and he's on a fixed income, to an area. So what I'm here today is I'm concerned that he's treated in a fair and just manner, and that he is compensated appropriately, because now you're asking him to now have to leave and to find another suitable area that is safe for him. And that's my concern, is that, you know, in doing this, for whatever reason you want to do this, for economic revitalization, like I said, I'm not clear, it's not clarity on what is the purpose of it, but to make sure that he is in a position that he can go somewhere that is safe, and someplace that he's not going to be able to not be able to afford this new place because he's on a limited fixed income. And that's my concern here, is that you treat him in a fair and just manner, and that he's compensated appropriately for these actions that you propose. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
have no further speakers.
Great. Thank you, Ms. McGill. All right, council. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.